Hi, my name is Mike, and today I've got a message from the Prophecy 444 news site called Fully Ripened, given to 278 Pike LK on March 18, 2019, if you Google that. Right, it's a very encouraging message. I'll read it out now. It's called Fully Ripened. My daughter, write my words to those with ears to hear and eyes to see, and to hearts that firmly rely on my wisdom and forego their own human reasoning. Only those that have given up their own fleshy reasonings are presentable as my first fruits, the first fruits of the harvest. Those with 100% trust in my ways, my authority and my timing. These have given up their own authority and have submitted fully to my authority alone. They give heed to me alone and live with the assurance that my wisdom is beyond their own comprehension. I will present these, my first fruits of the harvest, as they have reached their fullness, not by their own volition, but by the helping force of my mighty hand. The maturing and ripening process of these, my first fruits, was different for each, but in the common they share my fullness. They comprehended that it is not by any of their own power or will, but by my decision alone, that they have reached this point in their manifestation. Humbled, they will shine in my glory alone, shedding the ways of this world to walk engulfed in my wisdom and glory. My first fruits walk 100% in my authority, and despite the human reasoning still existent within them, they become slaves to my will alone and exist solely to achieve my goals for them. They will walk under the authority of the Most High, and there will be nothing that will inhibit their abilities to carry out my directives. These share in human brokenness, these share in human emptiness, for they have been brought low in order to be brought high. They have been pressed down in order to expand exponentially, not by any power of their own, but only the power that I have imparted within them. My first fruits are a representation of my redemption and sanctification that was plotted and planned and executed among them, occurring while they were not fully aware that this process was even taking place. This has been the surgical process of circumcision of heart. It was surgically precision executed by my perfect hand. These, my first fruits, forgo their earthly desires for heavenly ones and have waited patiently for this manifestation of my kingdom within them. These were chosen not based upon ability, characteristics, works, knowledge or wisdom, but were chosen and placed in this time upon your earth at the foundation of creation for execution of my wisdom and plan of recreation of my creation to myself. Just as all parts of my body serve various purposes, these in my first fruits will each serve my purpose with different abilities, tasks and undertakings, with the fulfillment of my ultimate plan being their ultimate destiny. It is with undeniable joy and assurance of victory that soon I will present these first fruits to my Father, so that the process of harvesting may begin. Their circumcision of the heart has been completed to perfection, and the battle plan laid before them with my assurance of victory. Set your eyes upon my majesty and watch my victorious plan unfold. I love you, my creation, Yeshua HaMashiach. So that was the message. I just want to speak a bit more about the Feast of First Fruits. I've taken it from this particular website called int.j.org, and it speaks about the Festival of First Fruits. Let me read a bit about that. Season of the harvest, the first fruits. And this is taken from Exodus 23:14-16. 3 times you shall keep a feast to me in the year. You shall keep the feast of unleavened bread, and the feast of harvest, the first fruits of your labours, which you have sown in the field, and the feast of ingathering at the end of the year, when you have gathered in the full fruit of your labours from the field. 3 times a year, the people of Israel were required by God to come to Jerusalem for a holy convocation. Passover, Pentecost and Tabernacles are the 3 great pilgrimage feasts which the Israelites were instructed to celebrate. All 3 biblical feasts were celebrations of thanksgiving from the different seasons of harvest in Israel's calendar. First fruits. The Passover feast was the first of the 3 great harvest festivals. It was also called the Feast of the First Fruit, or Chag HaBikurim. Also from Leviticus 23:10-11, speak to the children of Israel and say to them, when you come into the land which I give to you and reap its harvest, then you shall bring a sheaf of the first fruits of your harvest to the priest. He shall wave the sheaf before the Lord and be accepted on your behalf. On the day after the Sabbath, the priest shall wave it. So every Passover, on the day after the Sabbath, a sheaf of first fruits, Bikurim in Hebrew, were to be waved before God. The first fruit represented not only the very first produce of each year, it also represented the entire harvest. Paul explains this in Romans 11:16, saying, for if the first fruit is holy, the lump is also holy. This means that through the offering and the setting apart of the first fruits, the entire harvest was set apart. Also, it says here that Israel is the firstborn. God called Israel as a nation his firstborn. Thus says the Lord, Israel is my son, my firstborn. Exodus 4:22. Also, Jesus was the first fruit, firstborn of all creation. It says here, Jesus was the first to become death, and as such he entered the heavens and presented himself to the Father. But he did so not just for himself, but in him, as the firstborn, were presented at all the millions who would believe in him and not perish but have eternal life. John 3:16. And Jesus is the firstborn of all creation. I think that's all the information I can gather from that bit, which is interesting. Also it says here, the prophet Jeremiah proclaimed, behold, I will bring them from the north country and gather them from the ends of the earth. I will cause them to walk by the rivers of waters in the straight way in which they shall not stumble. For I am the father to Israel, and Ephraim is my firstborn. Also just want to say that even from the plagues of Egypt, it's very similar to the first fruits gathering, actually, because lately, I don't know if you've read, you probably did, a couple of months ago there was a plague of locusts in Mecca, and then a few months later, I think it was March this year, was a plague of locusts in Egypt. And after the plague of locusts, as we look at the plagues, next comes darkness. The plague of darkness came after the plague of locusts. And after the plague of darkness, the 10th plague was when all the firstborn were killed. And I believe that to be symbolized, the first fruits will be taken. So after the locusts were darkness, and after the darkness, the first fruits will be taken, I believe. So that's sort of that cycle. It's same like the Exodus. Anyway, I'll leave it there and say God bless you all. And bye-bye. Until the next message. Bye-bye.